Welcome to the Bak Up Podcast, a show on how technology is changing the way we live and do business. I'm your host, Ioannis Bakagiannis. Bak Up is ready to start. Hello. This is episode 3 of the Bak Up Podcast. Our guest in this episode is an esteemed professor and economist with more than 14 years of professional and academic experience. He holds a PhD in economics from Aristotelian Πανεπιστήμιο Thessaloniki, and his research interests revolve mostly around macroeconomic analysis, international economics, and trade. Currently, he is an economics professor at Yorkville University, a small yet an up-and-coming university in Toronto. If you are considering going for a master's or a PhD degree, you should definitely look it up. Our guest tonight is Pavloss Gkasis. Pavlo, welcome to the show.
Hi, Yanni. Nice to be here.
Nice to have you. Can you tell us a bit more about your journey to become a professor in Yorkville University?
Well, my journey started with my first degree from the University of Macedonia back in 2003 when I got my degree in International European Economic and Political Studies. And after that, I went to the United Kingdom in order to do my master's degree in International Business and Economic Development at the University of Reading. And following my master's degree, I went back to Greece in order to do my PhD, which was a PhD in economics with a focus on technological diffusion through the inflow of foreign direct investment. So after I finished my PhD studies, I started working in the academia. I started working as a lecturer. And before I came to Canada, I was a lecturer in economics at the International Faculty of the University of Sheffield. And after coming to Canada, I started my work at Yorkville University as a professor of economics.
Great. Did you have any experience in the industry at all?
Well, I've been working in many sectors. Like I have worked in many different sectors throughout my life, mostly throughout my student life, and all kinds of jobs. But I would say that my most important experience was while I was working during my PhD. So I was working in the industry for a tech firm, which was basically doing a multitude of things. It was a firm that was doing Congress organizing and web page development, and most importantly, live streaming services. Which, if you think about the fact that this whole thing started more than 15 years ago,
that was my first thought.
Yeah, I was working there from 2009 until 2011. So yeah, it was a nice experience because we did all kinds of things, and we were pioneering in areas that are now commonplace, but we did a really good job. It was like live media. This was the name.
And that sounds exciting. So how did you decide that that's not the life for you and you prefer to go into a more academic realm?
Well,
Since your words, you said it was cool enough for you.
Yeah, it was cool. It was really cool, and I still get to talk to a lot of people and the owner, of course, and we are in close contact still. The thing with the academia is that you start your journey in the academia, and then I think the most important period in all this is the PhD process. So the PhD process, many people have described it with many different ways, but many people have said that doing a PhD is like giving birth, for example, because it's strange with a PhD because even the last night before your viva, you feel that maybe you should quit. It's crazy because it's something that's so it's a lonely journey. And you have the support of your professors, of course, and I had great support from my professors. But you spend many hours all by yourself studying and running your models and trying to have everything working, because I was doing like a huge data management and data mining as well. So once this was over, it is then that you realize that you put all this effort, and now it's time to put all this effort into work. So like start and basically do the transition to the next stage, which is being part of the academia.
Mm-hmm. When did you know for sure that you're gonna go for a PhD? Did you know that before, when you were doing your bachelor's, when you're doing your master's? When did you know that yes, that a PhD is something that I want to be committed to do, to something that I want to do at the end of my life?
Yeah, for reasons I don't really know. It was always something like a kid's dream. I was always like, I'll finish my first degree, I'll do a master's, then I'll do a PhD. Maybe it was because in Greece we have a lot all this issue with getting as much education as you can.
Yeah.
Maybe this was the context is very important, of course. But I would say that after finishing my master's, because I also worked on multinational enterprises and for direct investment during my master's, and I had a great supervisor for my dissertation at the master's, and after finishing that, I thought that I should give it a try. I should give it a try. To be honest, when I finished my master's, and because Greece was booming back then, it was 2004. It was the Olympic Games, low unemployment, like the data, like the indices, the macro indices were going really, really well. The economy was in the Eurozone, so things were going really great with the country. And I was always thinking of maybe doing the transit to the academia, to the industry. Sorry, but then I finished my master's. I had done all this work in multinational enterprise and FDI, and then at the same time there was this opening for a funded PhD at Yorkville University, and it was a no-brainer for me. So doing what I love, and at the same time being able to support myself through the funding that I got.
Great. That makes sense. I believe that most of the people that do a PhD, they did not end up there by chance. It wasn't that they discovered that research is their thing. I think they had a preconceived notion of the passion of research, of doing something innovative from the beginning.
Yeah,
Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
no, you need that. You need that because this is what keeps you going.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Because it's a long-term commitment. It's like a 3 to 6 year commitment. And right now you're a professor. And can you tell us what are your latest research interests? What are the topics that pick your interest in the past like 6 months or a year?
Yes. So in the past year, to the date, because it was May when we started this collaboration. So I started my collaboration with colleagues from the University of Sheffield in the United Kingdom, from the Management School of the University of Sheffield, and we're conducting research here in Toronto on the challenges of AI development in Canada. So through the analysis of the AI ecosystem that we have here in Canada, we are trying to decodify what is the state of the ecosystem, and we are now in the process of writing our publications, of writing our papers in order to move on with our policy recommendations, because we feel that we have identified some niches and some gaps that we can talk about with regards to the AI ecosystem here in Canada.
When you're saying AI ecosystem, what exactly do you mean by that?
Yeah, so the idea is that we start having as a basis the entrepreneurial ecosystem, and we are trying to see how the entrepreneurial ecosystem is basically what is the conjunction between the entrepreneurial ecosystem and the AI ecosystem here in Canada. So what are the entrepreneurial efforts that you can find in the AI ecosystem that we have here? And what are the elements of the entrepreneurial ecosystem that are also evident in the AI ecosystem, and how are these two merging? First of all, whether they are merging or not, and if they are, how this merge is taking place.
Mm-hmm. So you're considering, for example, startups that their whole purpose is making AI, or are you considering even, like, for example, marketplaces, but they have AI algorithms in there inherently, but the product is not an AI product?
Well, it's broader than that. First of all, what makes it broader is that we already have conducted interviews in Montreal, which happened like 1.5 years ago. And then last May, I started my interviews here in Toronto, and we have now two data sets of interviews in these two major hubs that we have here in Canada. So this is the first aspect which makes it broader. And the second aspect is that we're targeting people and firms and organizations in general from different segments of the ecosystem. So specifically myself, I've done interviews with small startups. I've done interviews with public administration, with larger firms, the banking industry. So we try to grasp as much as we can from the ecosystem in order to have not all, but at least the most important players in the system, in the space.
Interesting. And so what makes what makes you interested in AI in the first place? How you became, because from economic, I see that this cross pollination of finance and AI all more and more lately. But how
Mhm.
you got interested from a purely economical standpoint to the AI and the AI entrepreneurial ecosystem in the first place?
Well, to be honest, as I told you, my PhD was on technological diffusion
Mhm.
and foreign direct investment. So um, this is something that is highly connected with foreign direct investment and with technological diffusion, of course, because, for example, one of the things that has come up is the fact that many large firms that are basically from the United States are now moving out from the United States and are coming and establishing stronger presence in Canada and especially Toronto. And one of the aspects that I was studying in my PhD is exactly what will this do to the domestic economy. So is this something, for example, that is going to leave something behind if at some point this ends, or is it something that the domestic economy will manage to absorb? This is what we call in the literature the absorptive capacity. Canada is a country that, of course, has the absorptive capacity to take all these investments and gradually diffuse these investments to the local ecosystem. But the question is this sustainable? And what are the factors that are coming into play in order for Canada to be able to reap the benefits of all that?
Oh,
This is one of the questions, for example, that I'm interested in answering.
that's a very complex question. I'll tell you that. I tried for a couple of seconds to wrap my hand around the whole concept. So you're basically analyzing a potential, for example, Facebook that's already here, or for example, some Google headquarters coming to Toronto that we're discussing at some point.
Mm-hmm.
And what would be the effects of such a potential move in economics wide, culturally wide? From what kind of lenses are you taking into consideration?
Now, the previous answer that I gave you was mostly in terms of what is my long-term interest in this research that we are doing. So this is something that we have discussed with the colleagues that I'm collaborating with,
Mm-hmm.
and we said that at a later stage, we might go into this area. For the time being, what we are mostly interested in is examining, as I said, the how is the entrepreneurial ecosystem merging with the AI ecosystem here. So let's say my more active role will come at the next with the next papers we're going to be publishing. For this part, my role is to basically conduct the interviews. So I conducted the interviews, do the preliminary analysis, and then because I'm now very aware of how, at least I hope I am very aware with how things are working here in Toronto, to contribute to the Toronto leg of our paper, which will basically discuss the space here. What I have identified as problems here, what I have identified as challenges, as opportunities for the space.
Let me pick your brain then about your thesis, and you're saying how technology diffuses. How can you give us like the layman's terms of how technology diffuses within a region, and how AI maybe is different from traditional technologies, or have you seen anything like that?
Yeah. Well, with regards to my case study, which was the case of Greece, and the reason was that my funding was very specific, and I got the funding exactly because the ministry wanted me to examine the case of Greece, of course. So what we found is that uh, if multinational enterprises, and that's pretty common in the literature as well, if multinational enterprises have presence in countries that do not have the proper level of absorptive capacity, then they get to, you know, work as an outlier. So basically, work on a league of their own, and then it's not easy for the domestic economy to, as I said earlier, to reap the benefits of this presence. And that's exactly what we found in Greece. We found, for example, that in a multitude of sectors, the sectors could not, like the domestic firms could not gradually adopt all this technology that could potentially be diffusing by the multinational enterprises because it wasn't probably diffusing. Now, if we transfer now to what is happening here and in the AI space, to go to the second part of your question. Now, according to what I've gathered as information from the interviews, and we've done 25 interviews, so and as I said, with many different actors, I think there is a common ground there, which says that we are currently in a state of transition in the space, and everyone is expecting in the next 2, 3, 4, max 5 years for all these things to settle down. For the players that are, let's say, the enthusiasts and not, the hardcore AI, machine learning, deep learning people. So when the dust settles, everyone is expecting that the next phase of what we're experiencing here is that we will have off-the-shelf solutions, that we will have this infiltration of AI into multiple things of what we're doing in our everyday lives as consumers. So I think this is when we will see the real diffusion of AI in our everyday lives. And then since this will happen off the shelf, then you will see that diffusing in many different sectors of the economy that we're not really aware of them at this point.
What you're saying what you're saying reminds me of the notion of democratizing AI, like AI for everybody, making everything a cookie cutter, like just a Lego piece for the machine learning pipeline. Um, if that happens, and since the internet is global and services over the internet can be global, depending on how you set up shop in different countries, but can be global. Isn't that the locality and that diffusion that you're saying, it kind of loses its local flavor?
Well, I think there is I'll go a bit broader, and I will say that I think that in general, and that's mostly my intuition from what I see and hear around me. Large firms that were afraid of Linux, they're now going more open towards Linux. And you see, even in the academia, there is in the last few years a transition towards more and more open source. I think that education, because education is a huge part, knowledge is a huge part of this diffusion process, definitely, of course. It's like the most important. I think there is a global tendency towards freer and freer transfer of knowledge. You see, there is a debate going on with regards to why should we pay fees in order to have access to academic journals?
Yeah.
Why don't we transit to the open source? You see open source journals moving up the rankings constantly because people start, they improve their impact factors. So people start using them more and more. So big firms like Microsoft realizing that, open source probably is the way to go in the future. So if I'm not mistaken, I think this is something that I saw the other day. So I think people are more and more aware. And to be honest, even with the recent situation with the pandemic, you have a thing that I think is opening up. I think all this is opening up, and big firms, I think, will start trying to find other venues to generate profitability, and not so much by hiding behind, walls and keeping knowledge so much in-house. They will definitely keep in-house their niches. They will definitely keep in-house whatever they have as competitive advantages towards the competition. But other parts, I think, will start opening up, and probably AI will be part of this process as well. That's my intuition, but I think this is what is coming.
Very interesting take, especially what holds true to me from what you said is especially the education part, because right now education is getting truly freer and freer. Like everybody can make a Udacity course and put it out there, and actually I'm a big fan of that. I found a couple courses which they don't really give you credit. You just can't say, okay, I did this course from that particular individual. It's not very credible in a ISO standard way, but there is you have the capability to go there and seek knowledge if you are looking for knowledge. Even YouTube is a perfectly reasonable source of knowledge. And for sure, I think that helps in the technology diffusion. And I don't know about AI, because AI has a lot of math in the background that mostly people tend to forget. But for everything else, I think it's perfectly normal and will help that in that democratize your technology diffusion that you're arguing, for sure.
Well, I don't think the AI will, and that's coming from the interviews and the fact that I mentioned earlier about the off-the-shelf solutions. So I don't think that, as I said, this will take place as more and more people becoming, let's say, so aware of what it really is, as compared to using the final product that will have something with AI inside, and they don't really need to know what it is, but they will just use it intuitively. Like an example that many people use, like a lot of people in the interviews, and something which I've already experienced, and many people have experienced, of course, and many people that will see this podcast, is that, when I was working for the firm I mentioned in the beginning, we were creating websites and e-shops. And so this was one, as I said, one leg of the business. And a couple of, like, 4 or 5 years ago, when I started preparing, like 4 years ago, when I started preparing to come here to Canada, I started, because LinkedIn was there, but I wanted to increase my presence, for example, globally. So I did my own website, and I just found a free platform, and I just dragged and dropped the categories on my web page. I went into behind the system into a nice editor. I included all the information I had in my academic CV, all the things I wanted there. I cropped my image. I did all the itsy bitsy stuff, and then I just had my own website. And 10 years ago, I had to go to a firm and pay a lot of money and go back and forth with debugging and trying to, why is this button not working? Why do I get this error message or whatever? And then I just did it in like, let's say 1 day. And this is basically what everyone was saying will probably happen in a few years with AI. Mm-hmm. And these are highly respected people in the space. So I'm sure that I cannot give the names, but I trust their how they perceive the future, and I think this is what is coming. Yeah.
So from the preliminary results that not preliminary results, since you have all the data points that you guys almost all the data points that you need, and you're on the latter part of your first leg of your research. What would be the most surprising fact that came out of it? Like, was one thing that stood out as that you were not even expecting to come out as even a side outcome of of the process?
Yeah.
Can even be the people that you interacted with.
Well, I think what struck me most, what struck me most is that the culture issue, mm-hmm, with regards to different aspects of the culture in the space, and this is like it has it's like a, let's say, a beast with many different tentacles, right? And so you got issues like I got this from one interview, for example, which was very interesting. And this is one major actor in the space, which told me that you have people, for example, like one of the major advantages of Toronto, even by comparing Toronto with the United States and the Valley or the Bay, is that you got a lot of talent here. Mm-hmm. And the openness of Canada is bringing more and more people, which is like giving a lot of potential and a lot of dynamic to the space. So surprisingly, you got people coming from countries with a long tradition in entrepreneurship, because, as I've said, this is our focus on our research. And gradually, because Canada is described by a lot of the actors in the space as mostly risk averse in terms of how business is being conducted, many businesses seek for traction in order to give funding, for example, business angels, and VCs, so venture capitalists. So they want to see traction. So they told me that people that are coming from entrepreneurially minded cultures are coming here, and they become more and more risk averse. So you have, like, let's say, Greeks who are very entrepreneurially minded, or people from other small countries that had to be very entrepreneurial in order to make ends meet, in order to survive in their countries. They come here and they become, let's say, more institutional. They go to the big players, and they're afraid of going into entrepreneurship. And this was something that I found very hard to believe, but of course, I trusted my interviewee. Another aspect of culture.
I can vouch for that. I definitely believe that Canada is a very conservative country, and I even see it as a kind of socialistic country if you take it seriously enough.
These things, there's always a good aspect and there's always a bad aspect. Okay, maybe, and this is the next thing that came up, which was because of this risk aversion, there was the next issue that came up, which was the financing issue and how difficult it is for many startups to get funding.
Raise capital.
Um, but yeah, to raise capital. But at the same time, let me remind you here that Canada, when we had the financial crisis of 2008, was hit by the financial crisis, but not to the extent that Europe was hit, not to the extent that Portugal, of course, the United States, and then the transit to Europe and Portugal, Spain, and Ireland, and Greece, and Italy, all these countries, and Canada, which was next door, Canada, which was is entangled with the United States in terms of how business is conducted between the two countries, wasn't hit so hard, and a large part of that was probably because of this more careful approach and more risk averse approach towards business. So there's always a
Yeah.
good side to the story and a bad side to the story.
Yeah, yeah,
Depends on
always pros and cons on these type of policies, right?
exactly
Uh,
exactly.
and yeah, well, 2008 was a historic moment that nobody could have predicted. Well, somebody did. That's why there is a movie, The Big Short. But right now, nobody could have predicted the pandemic that there is
Yeah.
out there, right? Does a phenomenon like that impact how your research is conducted right now, or how or the outcomes of the research, or could the pandemic change how variables in your research are stated, or they have been stated in the past?
um, I would say that it's not affected because what has happened with us as researchers and as teachers, as academics, is that we're just the transition to online. We're just delivering everything from home,
Mhm.
and we do our work from home. And at the end of the day, a lot of our work is conducted at home. So because it's the after hours that you put in order to do all these things. So I wouldn't say that it is affected. Maybe not even at all. A large part of the interviews I did via Skype or via other platforms online. I would say like 30% of the interviews were conducted like that because of the availability of my interviewees. And then other interviews were conducted face to face. But the outcome was the same, and the you know the feedback we got from all of these interviews didn't have any like there wasn't any difference between either it was on face to face or online. So no, there was no issue with regards to that, and I don't think it will affect at any point either the discussion
Mhm.
that we're going to be conducting or the findings. No.
So the policies that your guys are trying to figure out to suggest to, I guess, the government or the governing bodies might take. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. It's gonna be are gonna be the same regardless of the state of the world at that time. Because I was thinking that with the pandemic right now, everything is shifting. And in entrepreneurship, it's gonna be a bit different. You're not gonna see the hustling, the daily going from one event to the other. Right now, maybe the events are even virtual. There are different types of events. I don't know what is happening right now. And again, technology is gonna be there, but the, as you said, knowledge transfer right now, it's only through the internet part of the process.
Yeah.
So that was my further question is like, that is this situation impacting at all uh,
Yeah, I
the
think.
ecosystems in general and your policies as a consequences of that?
Yeah, I think that somehow, as like almost all of the time, like as it happens most of the time in life, there is a balance.
Mhm.
So the balance is that, yeah, you there are there are a lot of things that are getting lost as we speak, because most of these firms, they're working like in uh, open working spaces, and there is this constant communication of people, and people sitting around like large offices and sharing their experiences and sharing, doing faster debugging or whatever it is that they are creating, and trying to find solutions to all these problems. And this, because of the pandemic, is going a little bit to the back burner. But at the same time,
Mhm.
if you think that uh, how much time is being saved at the same time from people that are, you just wake up in the morning, you make a coffee, and then you turn on your PC, your laptop, or whatever it is that you're working with device, and then like in 5 minutes, like uh, uh, in 5 minutes, you're like ready to go, right?
Mhm.
And in a city like Toronto, for example, maybe like these people are commuting from like 1 hour and a half, and then they need
Three,
to run like
three plus
like
hours.
or 3+ hours, or they need to run like crazy at like 5 o'clock or 6 or 7, in order to get back home like after 2 hours. And so that's why I said I think there's like this trade-off and this balance that at the end of the day comes, which is, yeah, of course, the face-to-face is always makes things move faster, but at the same time, there's a lot of time that is being saved, which is compensating for this loss that we have of human communication and this open working, like open spaces aspect of how things are done there. Like, let me give you an example. I'm experiencing that with my students. So I prefer the face to face, of course, but at the same time, when I started the online, there were many advantages that I had never thought of. For example, I work um, with two devices. So I got my laptop and I've got my tablet. I use my tablet as a whiteboard, and I do my lecture on the laptop. And then for the first time in my life, of course, I can write on the whiteboard, and I can look at my students at the same time, which means that I this enables me to first of all understand who really understands what I'm doing over there, and who's paying attention. And then this also, because it's even easier now, and I'm not afraid of the mumbling that will start behind my back or whatever. It's making it more accessible to me as well. So the pros and cons that we mentioned earlier.
Interesting.
So yeah.
Interesting. Interesting. So what do you have in store for the rest of 2020? Any new research goals? Any new academic goals that you've set for yourself?
Yeah, so Yanni, at the moment we finalized putting together the main findings of each interview. We had it was a pretty lengthy interview, and I would like to thank all the interviewees because uh, they were very open to doing the interviews. And let me tell you here that this was another thing that I forgot to mention. It is something that is happening here in Canada, is that I approached many people just through LinkedIn. I just said, hello, I'm doing this research, and would you like to connect and then arrange an interview? And people from many different levels. So I got like to really high levels, managerial levels from big businesses as well. So all of these people were very open, and I would like to thank them through this podcast. If anyone sees this podcast, so it would be great. So it was very open, and after connecting with them, we did the interviews, and now, as I said, we're in the process of putting together the findings of this pretty lengthy interview, which was around 20 questions. So we got a lot of information, um, and now we're compiling this, and we hope by October to have finished the paper. and then hopefully to submit it for publication, and then to move on with the next one. And the next goal is to expand even more. So after finishing with Montreal and Toronto, we would like to expand this probably to Waterloo, and then go to Alberta, and then even Vancouver. So it depends, first of all, on how the paper will be shaped, and then what will be our prospects for some additional funding, because in order to open it up, we might need some additional funding for that.
Some additional resources. Yeah.
But this, and just to finish with that, this, if we manage to pull this through, then it would give us a very, very good perspective on the pan-Canadian AI ecosystem. So it will be fantastic for our research.
Yeah, and it does make sense. That's very, very exciting. And I believe that's the what you were saying about everybody, that it was so open. I think that's that they say here. That's the Canadian way of doing it, and I found it to be true. Whenever you are really in a need, and you have a purpose, and you're not wasting anybody's time, and you're being very honest about it. I've never found anybody being mean or closed or didn't want the connection at the end of the day.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I wasn't expecting that, to be honest, but I was really happy that I saw it happening, and many people gave me additional connections, and it was just great. It helped us a lot. And the same happened in Montreal as well. I need to mention that as well.
Yeah, maybe it's because you're an extra nice guy. That's why. All right, Pavlo. If you could summarize for us the past hour, what if we had to keep 10 words out of your research interest, what would it be?
So with regards to the ongoing research that we're doing, which is, I think, it will be very, very influential, I hope, because there are issues that need to be addressed. I think the main issues that we will focus on and are very important to stress is the commercialization aspect of AI. Where is the state in Canada with regards to that? The problems with regards to the commercialization, the obstacles that are existing with regards to financing, and how is the financing aspect of the funding aspect is taking place in the space, and then of course how the culture of risk aversion will not become a hindrance for many startups in the space. So I would say that these are the three of the main points we would like to study. And then finally, how the entrepreneurial ecosystem, as I said, is meeting the AI ecosystem, and how can you bring these two together, because there are still gaps there that need to be filled.
Great, thank you so much, Pavlos. It was a blast. It was a pleasure. Guys, whoever wants to become a PhD, a doctor, or wants to continue their academic careers, please reach out to Pavlos. I think he's gonna be grateful to help you. And if your interests collide, maybe you could do some research together in the AI ecosystem in Canada. Pavlo, thank you. Thanks a lot for helping me with this podcast.
It was a pleasure. It was great. Thank you so much.
And I hope to have you again in the future.
Yeah, of course. With a published paper, we'll come back
published paper.
With
Yes,
the results. Yeah.
Great. Thanks a lot for talking to you.
Thanks. Have a good night.
Bye. This is it. Your mind is now backed up. To learn more about the topics discussed or the guests, follow the links in the description. Now you have the chance to subscribe, rate, like, dislike, and review the show. Also, looking forward to hearing your thoughts in the comments. Awesome. Thank you so much for joining me, and see you next time.